From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
This crisis, this famine, is a children's famine. Children are the most vulnerable to this crisis.
Across the Horn of Africa, more than 11 million people face starvation, especially children. The United Nations calls it a catastrophic combination of conflict, high food prices and drought. We'll go to Nairobi, Kenya for the latest and speak with Christian Parenti about climate change and the new geography of violence. Then Congress and President Obama near agreement on a $3 trillion deficit reduction package that appears to violate Democrats' pledge not to cut Social Security and Medicare benefits, as well as Obama's promise not to make deep cuts in programs for the poor without extracting some tax concessions from the rich. Then Cenk Uygur leaves MSNBC.
I got pulled in, and they told me, hey, listen, we were just, or it was actually one specific person, the head of MSNBC. He said, I was just in Washington, and people in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. I was like, whoa.
We'll go to Los Angeles to speak with Cenk Uygur. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The militant Islamist group AlShabaab has announced its ban on foreign aid groups remains in place in Somali areas under its control. AlShabaab reversed the long-standing ban earlier this month as the crisis in Somalia escalated into what the UN has now declared to be a famine threatening millions of people. The ban had grounded efforts to reach residents of drought-stricken areas across southern Somalia. AlShabaab has also dismissed UN claims of a famine in Somalia as, quote, 100% false. Touring southern Somalia Thursday, World Food Program Executive Director Josette Sheeran appealed for more aid.
They need fortified supplemental foods in massive quantities throughout the areas where they have been unable to be reached. So mostly in southern Somalia, we're seeing a weakened population, and we have to focus on this. We are called on all global supply lines to supply these fortified foods. We need the contributions and the supply chain to not end.
We'll have more on the Somalia famine after headlines. President Obama and Republican House Speaker John Boehner are said to be close to a $3 trillion deficit reduction package as part of a deal to raise the federal debt ceiling before an August 2nd deadline. The deal reportedly calls for lowering personal and corporate income tax rates while eliminating or reducing an array of popular tax breaks. Some Democratic lawmakers expressed outrage Thursday because the Obama-Boehner agreement appears to violate pledges not to cut Social Security and Medicare benefits, as well as Obama's promise not to make deep cuts in programs for the poor without extracting tax concessions from the rich. We'll have more on this story later in the broadcast. The Pentagon's expected to announce today it's prepared to implement the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, barring openly gay men and lesbians from serving in the U.S. military. President Obama signed the repeal into law last year, but had deferred its implementation until military leaders announced their readiness. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has ruled out talks with rebels amidst ongoing clashes. In remarks broadcast to a crowd of thousands of supporters, Gaddafi said there will be no negotiations with rebel forces until, quote, Judgment Day. Gaddafi's troops are locked in fierce clashes with rebels east of the capital, Tripoli, with rebels claiming to have captured a top pro-Gaddafi commander. NATO, meanwhile, is being accused of killing civilians in the city of Zlitan. On Thursday, foreign journalists were shown civilian sites allegedly hit by NATO bombs. A wounded Libyan man said a family of civilians were killed when NATO bombed their home.
It was a civilian site. The whole family passed away. They didn't die after the first airstrike, but died after the second one. It was a two-story building.
Syrian troops continue a crackdown on the opposition to President Bashar al-Assad. Forces under the command of Assad's brother have reportedly surrounded the Damascus suburb of Harasta, sealing off all entrances. Meanwhile, in the central city of Homs, Syrian forces have reportedly shelled civilian areas and conducted a number of raids. Government forces have reportedly killed some 40 people in Homs this week. Amnesty International is warning the Assad regime may be torturing dozens of detained opposition protesters outside of Damascus. The detainees were reportedly captured in a government raid last weekend. The ruling military council in Egypt has sworn in a new cabinet amidst ongoing protests demanding a faster transition from the era of ousted President Hosni Mubarak. The new cabinet has at least 10 new faces, but 13 top officials have stayed on. News International head James Murdoch is being accused of lying to British lawmakers in testimony this week on the phone scandal engulfing the Murdoch media empire. Murdoch told a parliamentary committee he's unaware of evidence phone hacking at News International, owned News of the World newspaper, was widespread when he approved a costly settlement in an individual case. But on Thursday, two former News International executives said they'd expressly told James Murdoch of an email that would undermine the company's claims that phone hacking was only committed by one rogue reporter. British lawmakers say they plan to ask Murdoch to explain the differing accounts. In a separate development, a former News of the World private investigator at the heart of the scandal addressed rumors News International is refusing to pay his legal fees. The prospect of News International withholding support has fueled speculation that the investigator, Glenn Mulcair, could identify company executives involved in the phone hacking. Mulcair refused to answer questions about his plans.
Well, as you can appreciate, we're in the middle of a number of inquiries at the moment, and it's a very fluent and developing situation. And like I said, the developments have been different from day to day, and I have no further comment to make at this stage. However, this may change.
Have they told you that they can't pay for your legal fees?
That's enough for now. Thank you.
The British government has lost a bid to throw out a lawsuit over the repression of the Kenyan struggle for independence against colonial rule. On Thursday, a British court ruled a group of veterans of Kenya's resistance movement can proceed with a lawsuit seeking compensation for human rights abuses during the Mau Mau rebellion of 1952 and 60. More than 100,000 Kenyans are believed to have been killed in the British crackdown. A Mau Mau veteran celebrated the ruling.
We are very, very happy with the ruling of the court in London today on our case. For a very long time now, we have remained steadfast in our pursuit for justice, for torture and that we suffered under the British government. With today's ruling, we are very happy that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
The computer hacker group known as Anonymous has released a trove of data it says was taken from computers belonging to NATO. In a defiant message, Anonymous called the move retaliation for a series of raids targeting alleged members earlier this week. 14 of the suspects were arrested for their alleged link to December attack on the online payment site PayPal. Anonymous took credit for the breach in response to PayPal's suspension of accounts that donated money to the whistleblower website WikiLeaks. And NASA has discontinued its space shuttle program after 30 years. The Atlantis space shuttle landed Thursday at Kennedy Space Center for the last time. Bob Cabana, director of the Kennedy Space Center, said efforts would now focus on NASA's space station.
We've got to focus on going beyond Earth now. We've learned how to work in low Earth orbit. We've got a lot more to learn about deep space and about long-duration space flight. We got a space station there as a result of this shuttle. I think that's got to be one of the shuttle's crowning achievements, that world-class laboratory that we have up there. Now we got to utilize it.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.